In this week's Maximize Your Medicare Weekly, we've got a pay cut coming to physical therapists, audiologists, and others. And in addition, we've got a controversy affecting a big Medicare Advantage carrier. Let's go. Up on your screen, you see something about physical therapists. And the American Physical Therapy Association is trying to, reverse a plan for 2021. And basically what has happened here is that there's going to be a 7 to 9% cut in the rate at which Medicare is going to pay this set of people: physical therapy providers, occupational therapy providers, speech language pathologists, audiologists, between a 7 and 9% cut to Medicare payment. That means they're going to be compensated less. Now, this may or may not affect you. Maybe you don't need physical therapy. Even then, you could actually be affected. And let me stop here to give you some background. Maximize Your Medicare is more than just trying to just figure out what individual plan. It's also trying to build you a rationale of why. Why do you need to keep up to date? Why do we have to keep, pay attention to this stuff? And the reason is because in addition to your own personal situation, your own personal health, right? In other words, 3 liters of Jack Daniels before 9 a.m., not a good idea. 2 boxes of cigars a day, not a good idea, right? That's healthcare. And I understand that people are largely focused on that. Have a good diet, exercise, et cetera, right? I'm not there. I'm not there to parent you on that, right? That's your decision. What I am, however, and a good part of Maximize Your Medicare has to deal with trying to make people aware of the fact that there are other stresses involved. In other words, the system as a whole has certain stresses. And here it comes. Number 1, demographic reality. Medicare has 62 million people enrolled. 62 million. That was from a release over the, within the past few months. The second is we have fiscal reality. You can know we have taken a huge economic hit as a result of COVID-19. And in addition to that, we have enormous amount of financial assistance coming from the government in order to deal with the ripple effects from COVID-19 and the massive loss of employment. Those things create additional stress. We already have a highly indebted country, right? We've just plunked a huge amount more on top of the federal debt load. So in other words, these stresses, in order to make the numbers fit, and I'm not here to say that the assistance is wrongly placed. It's an emergency situation. The issue, however, though, is at some point, you're going to see difficult choices, almost inevitable. Okay. And this is not to adjudicate fair or right, or I'm entitled, or I'm earned. I'm not, here to play politics. I'm not here to, tell you what your political or philosophical beliefs should be. I am here, however. That's what this video is for. That's why I want you to subscribe and like these videos. Make more people aware to understand that, hey, there are ripple effects going to exist as a result of these difficult choices. Let's go through them here and you'll see what I mean. So first is Medicare Advantage. Okay, so let's just presume that for a moment that you have Medicare Advantage. Well, what can happen? A number of things can happen. Here are some examples. Number 1, your physical therapist, your audiologist may stop participating in certain Medicare Advantage plans. They may be participating in 2020. They may choose to not be in 2021. Okay? That means 2 things. Number 1, if you're an HMO, you need to check to make sure that they still remain in your network. And number 2, is you need to check to see whether or not the amount that you will be charged, right, for a session, whatever the equipment, screenings, whether or not your costs will change. Okay. The fact of the matter is number two, certain of these healthcare providers, they may opt out of your HMO, in which case it may be best to change HMOs in order to change amongst Medicare Advantage plans in order to make sure that your providers are in network. That's the best way to minimize cost. If you're under PPO, slightly different, slightly. Okay, so now, again, the therapist may decide to not be in network there but still accept the federal Medicare card. If they accept the federal Medicare card, they will accept your plan. It's just that your costs will be higher. Okay, so it's not that you would have to pay 100% of the cost, but your cost, your copay, your coinsurance may be higher. So you'll want to check. So that's it for Medicare Advantage. Under Medigap, different. So for people who are new, Medigap covers the 20% not covered by Medicare Part B after you've met the Part B deductible, unless you're on Plan C or F, in which case Medicare pays for, or the carrier pays, the Medigap carriers pays for the Part B deductible. Now, under this situation, different, right? Which is that Medigap will still pay the 20%. So the fact is the physical therapists are going to take the cut and they're going to pay, and Medigap will pay the balance. Okay. Does that mean, however, that the physical therapist can't do anything? No, that doesn't mean that. Because since it's a Part B provider, they may decide to charge the Part B excess charge. And you can go to multiple videos that are sitting here on my channel, on the Maximize Your Medicare channel, that talk about Medicare Plan F and G and compare it to Plan N. In addition to that, we've got comparisons even between Plan F and Plan G. So the fact of the matter is this is legal. And again, I'm not adjudicating fairness. Someone's just taken a 9% pay cut, right? If this goes through, someone's going to take a 9% pay cut. I'm pretty sure no one's going to be happy with a 9% pay cut. Nevertheless, the physical therapist, the audiologist, they can impose the excess charge to claw back this amount. Now, under Medigap, right, Plan G, Plan F, those two will pay for the excess charge. However, if those are not your Medigap plans, then you would be responsible for this overage, this extra excess charge in full. Okay, so again, go back to the old videos. They'll explain to you. Maximize Your Medicare spends a fair amount of time to try to explain this to you. People say, Jay, you're being chicken little. You're being chicken little. That is not logical. That's not logical. Right here's your perfect example. Overnight, January 1, 2021, some set of healthcare providers, Part B healthcare providers, are going to take a 7 to 9% pay cut. And with just being agnostic, right? No opinion. You can understand that if you had to take a 7 to 9% pay cut, you might react just the same way as they. Now, the important thing is, as I've just explained, the question is upon you. What effect does that have on your cost of, accessing healthcare providers at the most efficient cost? And that's what Maximize Your Medicare is about. That's what this channel is about. Last point, and then we'll be done with this segment, which is that this is just a simple example. If you think that this is the isolated example and it's never going to occur again, I can't disagree with you more strongly, right? It's not me having a crystal ball. It's not me having a crystal ball. It just goes to show you the difficult choices that are putting pressure on the Medicare system as a whole. It makes all the sense in the world, just plain common sense, for you to check every single year so that you can get the best benefits for your dollar. So this is pretty tough stuff. This is an article that showed up in Axios.com. So first of all, let me say that I think that Axios.com is a very good website, generally speaking, for information that doesn't really sit in the New York Times on the front page. It has news analysis and certain interpretations without being overly impartial. Of course, I can't really say that any site, any location in the media has zero partiality, but Axios pretty good. So this is an article, anyway, back to the point, which is an article about Cigna, which is a large Medicare Advantage carrier, and Cigna, the large health insurance carrier as well, certainly. Now, what it does is it alleges a whistleblower lawsuit, as you can see there on your screen. It's kind of concerning, and this is going to be some tough stuff. You're going to have to bear with me here as I explain what is going on. Basically, what happens under Medicare Advantage is every carrier gets an allowance, just like you would give to your child, when they were, let's say, pre-adolescent. And so now for every enrollee, the way that this works is Medicare Advantage, the carrier receives their allowance from the federal government, the CMS. Okay. However, there's an adjustment. So let's just say that your allowance for your child is $100 a month. Okay, I'm making it up. I have no idea how this works now, but $100 a month. Now, if the person has special requirement, they got a special class for whatever reason, they need special attention, then what ends up happening is the CMS gives them an extra allowance. Okay. And the way they determine it is determined on the person's health situation. So you can see what happens. This whistleblower lawsuit is basically saying that the carrier, in this case Cigna, is reporting to the federal government, hey, look, we've got a lot of people and I need extra allowance. I need an extra allowance. Now, that in and of itself, we're not going to settle whether or not that's a good idea for a system to begin with. Jay, the citizen, Jay, the person who knows something about Medicare and the way this works, I don't love this. Okay, that's my personal opinion, and I just need to say that out loud. I don't love this system because the incentive here is too great. And you can see it. Cigna, and not necessarily Cigna, any Medicare Advantage carrier, they get extra money to divvy up across all of their policyholders. Okay? So this whistleblower lawsuit is basically alleging to say that Cigna, they're intentionally trying to report to the federal government, look, we need extra money because policy number 7, policy number 35, policy number 475,001. Okay, these are special cases. I need extra money. Okay. Now, this is kind of problematic because if they're what this whistleblower lawsuit is saying is they are intentionally, systematically trying to say that we've got a lot of people, please send us extra allowance. And that's basically what this whistleblower lawsuit is alleging, which is that, that the carrier in this instance is in fact systematically reporting more risky policyholders than the average case. And that's basically the issue. Now, I don't want to point at this particular carrier. And full disclosure, even though I don't represent that plan in 2020, that does not mean that I won't represent the plan in 2021. Because me, as the advocate for you, the policyholder, do you really care here? Yes and no, because reality is if that is the plan that fits you best, well, that's the plan that fits you best. Okay. And don't get me wrong, it's not riskless here for me to even post this. It's not, because nothing stops them from watching this or other Medicare Advantage carriers and saying, okay, we don't want to deal with this guy. That is true. And I'm cognizant of that. I'll give you a story here at the end of this segment. Anyway, what you have here is that this is not, so by what I'm saying about Cigna specifically, it is not really my point to Cigna, individually. It's just me reporting and giving you a fact. And it has happened in the past. If you look up on, Google and you look up Medicare Advantage upcoding, you will see that this has happened in the past. And you can see here, the carrier, this article says that this has happened in the past, as I just highlighted. Okay. Now, the real issue here are a couple. The first one that is somewhat concerning is the fact that that the carrier is conducting reviews, which it calls 360. Okay. So you can know that your Medicare Advantage carrier may be reaching out to you to try to get a health assessment under the idea of, please get your risk assessment. Now, the reason should be that the carrier is trying to cut off, meaning identify risky things about you in order to address your specific situation. Therefore, you can be in better health, right? And lower your costs, which also, not coincidentally, also means lower claims and lower costs to the carrier. But still, this is okay for me, right? I mean, ultimately, the fact of the matter is, if you're in better health due to the fact of a risk screening, can't really say anything too negative here. But the issue here is if these reviews are as a means to record false health conditions. And this is the issue. The crux of the matter is the fact that these risk assessments for you may be systematically used to say that policyholder 475,001, that person is very risky. And if that is false, now we have a problem. Right? Now we have a problem. And the reason you have a problem is because that means that the carrier is receiving an extra amount of allowance that I described when it didn't deserve it. It didn't need it. It was the average case, but still send me more money. Now, this is kind of a problem. And, obviously, because the reality is if this were just a private plan, meaning just the policyholder and Cigna with no other party, then it's okay, right? Because then reality is there's no extra allowance. The issue here is this extra allowance is coming from the federal government. This money is coming from the budget. A budget which is restrained by the fact that there's 62.3, I think that's the number, 62.3, 63.2, 62.3 million Medicare beneficiaries, 62.3 million. And we're going to go up to 50% of you on Medicare Advantage plans, to give you an idea of how enormous Medicare is and how enormous these plans are. Okay. And to make things worse here is that Cigna allegedly paid bonuses to doctors to complete certain numbers of these reviews. not part of this article, that number wasn't like $3. Okay, this is like $1,000. I want to call it $1,000 if a certain number of these reviews were completed by a primary care physician. So now you can see it, that they're not only getting this extra allowance, but they're paying primary care physicians to agree to do these types of things. Does it hurt the primary care physician? No, not really, because they're just doing their job. They'll do their job as described. Let's not even talk about the fact that, the healthcare provider, wrongdoing. We'll get to that at the end of this segment as well. But I just wanted to bring you up to date that while I don't think this is a systematic problem, the fact is there are leakages here within Medicare Advantage. Do I think that this is a widespread problem? I don't know. I'll just be candid with you. I don't know. These articles are written to get attention. And it's got my attention because of the fact that this extra money is coming from the federal government. Okay. It's part of the reason of why, I said a few moments ago, I don't really love this program, because the incentive here is so strong to try to get this money, from the federal government. The natural inherent incentive is so strong that it's impossible, that it's just very, very hard to control and how to police this stuff. Because clearly, if someone's systematically doing that, if a carrier is doing this systematically, that is taking from the federal budget. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Now, first of all, let me just say that I've written an article for, thestreet.com Retirement Daily. So I'm an expert contributor here, and, I'm going to show you links and things like that for articles and, videos that I've appeared. You'll see down here that there is a policing function in place that exists, that you can see, in fact, that this carrier has been sanctioned in the past. Now, this happened with their prescription drug plan. This is, this actually I don't believe was the Medicare Advantage plan. I'm not sure, but I want to call it the Part D plan. But anyway, basically, Cigna was disallowed from offering Medicare Advantage plans and Part D plans in 2016. In other words, there are strong disincentives, right, if they're systematically found to be denying coverage or being false advertising about benefits. Okay, so you could see how complicated this subject is. You can see how complicated. This is the first time, really, that I've talked on a video about it. Okay. Let me just finish by the first couple of things. Number one, very importantly, if you think that you're not getting the benefits as defined by your Medicare Advantage plan or your Part D plan, there is a formal appeals process available. There is. It starts with the prescription drug carrier or the Medicare Advantage plan carrier. Okay, there's no getting around it. There's multiple steps. You can go to Maximize Your Medicare. I have a link there that says filing an appeal. There are a number of formalized steps there. Okay. That's different than if you're on Medicare plus Medicare supplement, Medigap. Okay. If you're a Medigap holder, then your complaint, your appeal is filed with the federal government, original Medicare. Okay. So the processes, there are two different processes. Okay. One for Medicare Advantage, another one if you have Medigap, or if you have nothing and other than original Medicare. Okay. So that's the first thing. So if you got billed for a service that was not performed, please do that, right? Because in the same way here, remember that if you're being billed, that the federal government is paying a lot of that, and that is taking from the federal budget. Okay, and in a day of COVID-19 and the pandemic, there have been, news stories about people trying to get you to sign up for tests or get testing equipment for free, and then they kind of, innocently say, I need your Medicare ID. I'm not going to call you asking you for your Medicare ID for this purpose. My clients, I have to get this information to assist them in enrollment. And even then, there's countersigning always, right? I don't just get to type in their Medicare ID and stuff like that without a very clear message to them. Do you understand that you are enrolling in this particular plan? And they get an email from the carrier to basically confirm this. So it's very important stuff here. Okay, but my point here, back to the point, which is that if you have received a bill, if you see something on your explanation of benefits on a service that wasn't completed or something that you didn't receive, please put your hand up. You can do this. You can call 1-800-MEDICARE in order to report this. You can call your Medicare Advantage plan carrier to report this. You can call your Part D plan provider to report this. Okay, this is what you can do to assist with fraud. Last point of this segment. This is pretty touchy stuff. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, I'm posting this to inform people it's with commercial risk to me, right? Because every year I've got to get permission from the carriers in order to say, hey, I'm going to represent your plan without prejudice. And I'm going to, right? I have to put my hand up. I have to sign my name to it. I have to put my license on the line every year with every carrier. There's no getting around that, especially on Medicare Advantage and on Part D plans, okay? Which we're happy to do. I'm happy to do it because I want my clients to actually get the comfort that, hey, I'm putting my fiduciary duty on the line when I'm making a suggestion to you. And this happens every day, which is that sometimes there's a little hole. There's a particular plan that I don't represent in a particular location in the country. Let's just call it Washington State. If, for example, my dip switches aren't flipped correctly, I'll just tell them, look, I'm not affiliated with this plan in that state for the year. Go ahead. That's still what my finding was. No problem. I lost what? Not even, the compensation is so low that it doesn't matter to me. It'll make a huge difference to my client. There's no question about that. Back to the touchiness, which is this topic is so touchy, in fact, and the risk to me is fairly high, even posting this video, a kind of a secret to you. But the reality is that, I've tried to actually ask other people that I call Medicare experts, And there aren't very many, right, that I actually go and bounce, ideas or conversations about Medicare because, to me, the reality is that most of this stuff is not very complicated. But there can be an occasion, and this is one of those occasions. I ask them, what do you think about upcoding? What do you think about this general notion? So, number one, I've spoken with persons who, and this was an actual response, and I'm not going to name names. The response was, I get paid a fee as a consultant from Medicare Advantage carriers. I have no comment. That's one. Another one. Someday in the very near future, I may be employed by a Medicare Advantage carrier. I have no comment. So in other words, you can see the issue is that not only are there power incentives by the carriers to try to get this extra allowance, but in addition to that, the qualified whistleblowers, the qualified persons to inform you here, not very many. Not very many. Anyway, this gives you up to date. This is going to be an ongoing story. Again, 50% of Medicare beneficiaries, which is now over 30, that would mean over 31 million, are going to be enrolled in Medicare Advantage plans. Basically, the CEOs of Medicare Advantage carriers, right? They're pretty much in agreement. And I would agree with that. That's absolutely my anecdotal evidence as well. Nevertheless, there are controversies here, and is it awful? Oh, whoops. Well, I forgot a point. This is what I get for not working with the script, right? I mean, like I said, I'm too busy to create scripts. So I just literally talking about these types of topics with this amount of detail off the top of my head, literally. In the carrier's favor is here, and this is an important point, is while you may have thought that this is not acceptable, let me just say that this is also going to be very, very hard to prove that it systematically is the case. All right. Because let's just say you're diabetic type 1. Okay. So you rely on insulin, right? Well, you can know that 5 people that are diabetic type 1, you'll have 5 different cases of all different outcomes. All different, even though it says diabetic type 1, right? You know this. You probably know some, but you probably know multiple people who are diabetic type 1. The issue here is that you could say, it's easy to say, well, diabetic patient number 4, not 1, 4. Diabetic patient number 4 is a particularly risky situation, in which case they should be getting the extra allowance. Totally justified. However, that after the fact that patient number 4, well, it got better, or he or she didn't actually require healthcare services. Could this happen? The answer is absolutely could happen. Absolutely could happen. And you see how complicated it becomes, because what ends up happening is this patient number 4 could be a high-risk situation. The doctor could say, look, logically, this person's a high-risk situation. This is my professional reason. These are my professional reasons for, making that assessment. For a lawsuit to say that doctors are going to hear and systematically cherry picking and intentionally increasing stating the risk assessment, that's going to be tough stuff. That's going to be tough stuff. And ultimately, that's kind of why I started this, many minutes ago, by kind of intervening and saying, I don't love this system as a whole, because it's too many the incentives are too strong at the Medicare Advantage carriers. The amount of error could be too high. For me, the better way would have just said, look, here's your average amount. Everyone gets the average amount. Let the carriers manage the risk. And if they did so correctly, they're going to make more money. If they did so incorrectly, they're going to make less money. For me, that to me would be the better way to manage the risk. No one's asking Jay. We'll stop right here.